What's up, everybody? Welcome into some random research ramblings with Rob. Hope everybody's having a nice weekend. I know I am. Hot off the heels of a fantastic show with our friend Bart Camp Friday night. Definitely more to think about when it comes to the Helsinki Passage. So check that out if you haven't yet. And oh, by the way, make sure to hit the thumbs up button on this video here for me and hype it if you got some hype points. Appreciate you. Today, I'm in my feels a little bit. And this might be a little bit of a gloomy show, if you will. But I feel like some things like this need to be talked about every once in a while. Memento Mori. Yeah. It's an old Latin saying. Basically means remember, you're going to die at some point. Maybe not at some point. I added that. But remember, you're going to die. And it's a good thing to keep in mind when going about one's daily life activities. You know, it helps bring some levity to certain situations that maybe sometimes we might take ourselves a little too seriously for this life. And we must remember, look, it's really not that serious. Life will go on. Things will happen. People will move on. Things will happen. Things will happen that we like. Things will happen that we don't like. But ultimately, we, me and you, are responsible for our own happiness and the way we choose to live our lives on a day-to-day basis. Whether or not you want to fill that time doing something good for other people, whether you want to fill that time doing things that are meaningful and productive for yourself. You know, I know we all have to clean the house. We all have to do laundry. We all have to do the dishes. We all have to cook. You know, we all have to mow the yard unless we're rich and have gardeners and all of that stuff. But I think sometimes we take ourselves a little too seriously in this whole JFKA assassination milieu, croissant, if you will. But only because, and I can only speak for myself, it's about the passion. It's passion. I'm passionate about this subject. Damn it. I am. But I also at times think to myself, you know, you're not as good. You're not as good of an analytical mind as a lot of other people that have come before you. You're not as good of an analytical mind as some of the best that are out there alive today. I do. I think that sometimes. And I know that's not a healthy thoughts, but just to contradict that thought for a moment, and you think back on some of what we in the conspiracy community consider to be greats. You know, people like Mark Lane, people like Harold Weisberg, people like David Lifton, people like Robert Groden. You know, the people that I named, and I could go on and on and on and on and on. And just because I'm leaving some off the list here does not mean their contributions were any less than any other. I just simply don't have time to name them all here. But you get the point, okay? for a lot of these men and women out there who have decided to dedicate their life to researching and trying to figure out what happened to our 35th president on November 22nd, 1963, because we don't believe the official story, then I commend all of them, all of you, all of them, all of you for doing so. It is important in the big scheme of things for a better mindset and understanding about how the world truly works. I think sometimes we get so distracted by the bullshit and monotony of our daily lives and the stuff that they spoon feed us through mainstream media, narratives, talking heads, the way we're bombarded by social media today. It's kind of insane if you really stop to think about it. And for people like me, who are Gen Xers, who remember what life was like before the internet. Yeah. People existed before the internet, folks. We truly did. You know, I was born at a weird time in history, I guess you could say. What we call the beginning of the end. And these are the children of the baby boomers. Yes. And I fit right along in that. Born in the 70s, 1974 to be exact. You know, I remember going to see Star Wars in the theater, Jaws in the theater, Indiana Jones in the theater, E.T. in the theater, Return of the Jedi, Empire Strikes Back, all of that good stuff. Having to actually go to a toy store to buy toys. You know, you couldn't just order them online, if you will. But you can mail order a gun in 1963, apparently, which is crazy. And then came the birth of the personal computer. Now, computing systems have been around since the 50s, but very simple, very large machines, very impractical for one's personal use, if you will. But then in the 80s, we got personal computers, computer gaming systems. And then in the 90s, of course, we got pagers, laptops, home computers, the internet. Yes, the internet. Boy, it was a game changer. I'm not going to lie to you. A game changer. When it comes to being able to share information with anyone in the world at any time for free. Well, except for the cost of your dial-up internet back then, whatever that was. $9.95 a month or something, I think, roughly. I don't know. But I digress. Again, I ramble sometimes, so pardon me. But to get back to my original train of thought here, you know, when mentioning all the greats, people that we consider great minds of the case, they didn't solve it. They didn't solve it. And if they did, they didn't get recognized for it. It seems like a lot of the greats always did something stupid to tarnish their legacy. Sometimes you need to leave well enough alone. Okay? And what I mean by that is, Mark Lane was one of the first. Okay. Rush to Judgment, the book. Being involved in the case, putting himself in debates with Warren Commission lawyers, offering to represent Oswald, for the Warren Commission. He was trying to set the record straight from all the Warren Commission obfuscation and horse's assery that they were doing. It was a commendable thing. And look, his book Rush to Judgment, the film Rush to Judgment, great things from a very early researcher when it comes to this case. But then here comes the 70s. And he gets himself entangled in some odd things like Jonestown. And oh, look, here comes the 80s. And the whole Liberty Lobby. Shit. The whole Liberty Lobby scandal and lawsuit. And by being involved in these things, it kind of tarnished his image a bit. It kind of gave him a little less credibility, if you will. And look, what Harold Weisberg did for FOIA and requesting documents and getting documents out of the government was amazing work. What he was doing under the table and trying to network and look into things is commendable. Sure. But he also had very few allies in the JFK research community back then because he found flaws in most of them and wasn't afraid to speak about them. Now, if Harold Weisberg wasn't such a dick, and if he maybe applied his hoarding skills to his research skills, and his people skills a little bit, maybe he could have been even greater than what he was. David Lifton, he started off a little kooky back in the 60s. But he stumbled across some good information here and there. And then he had some really out there, wacky, goofy, somebody's dressed up like a tree in Dealey Plaza, shooting the president type of shit. But he was able to redeem himself in the 80s with the book Best Evidence, with his supporting documentary movie as well. Best Evidence, David Lifton. Lots of good stuff in there. Hard to refute when you got a lot of eyewitness testimony and a lot of foolery around the medical evidence. Yeah. The problem with Mr. Lifton is he just didn't know when to quit. And some of his interviews towards the end of his life were a little out there, claiming more crazy things. And you look at some of the folks that are around today researching the case. And I'm not talking about folks my age. I'm talking about boomers. Baby boomers. Folks that are pushing in their mid 70s to 80s that are still heavily involved in this case. And most of them have made good contributions throughout the years to trying to find the truth about what happened to John F. Kennedy. Some folks like to focus on the why instead of the who. I'm more concerned about the who than the why. But I understand that if you can figure out one, then you get the other, allegedly. The only problem with those theories are that there was so many, so many possible enemies to choose from. It seems like JFK had managed to piss off the entire world in 3 short years. But, you know, when you're a person making difficult decisions and you're put in very precarious places to make such decisions, you're not always going to be Mr. Popular with folks. The problem I run into, and I'm not going to mention any names except for the ones that have already passed, but just out of respect for the ones that are still here, I will say this. You know, we make fun on the show at some people because it's just comical to me sometimes. Can just want to hang on so badly because at one time they contributed something meaningful to the case. Yet in the past 20 or 30 years, ever since they did, nada. You can only rest on your laurels for so long. Okay? And look, I've got bookshelves after bookshelves after bookshelves of books written by the greats and some not so greats. There's a lot of dead people sitting on my dusty bookshelves. Okay? And that's the legacy they left behind. A dusty old fucking book sitting on my bookshelf that I probably read 10 years ago, 20 years ago. There might be 1 or 2 decent nuggets in one. Okay? Nothing you couldn't find today by a simple Google search or a simple document search. And it's sad. It's sad to me. You know, when you talk about the legacy of things past, I mean, look no further than Dallas and what it's become. I mean, this whole conference thing is a joke. No more press releases. No more mainstream news coverage. No more local news coverage of great grand revelations. You know, like I tried to explain to Joe, just so he could understand how irrelevant conferences have become in 2026. I said, Joe, you do realize, okay, that we do the equivalent of 4 conference presentations a week here on the show. Yeah. When you break it down, we do 2 live shows, at least 2 hours long apiece. At a conference, you're lucky to get a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour if you're lucky, right? On a subject. And I'd like to think that this show is not just rehashing the same old boring bullshit that you've all heard for years and years and years and years and years. And I realize they can't all be bangers, but one of the core parts of this show is to try to bring you new information, new documents, and new insights into these documents and revelations. A different way to think about things sometimes, if you will. Because look, there's only so much out there. Short of another Malcolm Blunt camping out of the archives and just copying shit that is not online and then putting it online for everybody to see, will we get anything new? Because you can declassify all the documents you want. But if NARA never puts them online for us to see, well, then we're fucked. And, you know, Joe can tell you from his most recent trip to NARA that they do not make it easy for you to do research there. Hence the problem that we're in. But yeah, when you stop and think about it, I told Joe, I said, you know, we do the equivalent of 4 conference presentations a week. That's 16 conference presentations a month. That is over, roughly, between 170 and 180 conference presentations a year. When you have some people working all year to do one 30 or 45-minute conference presentation. I mean, just think about that for a second. I think if you break down any hour of our show, except, you know, take away the beginning, you know, sometimes and the end sometimes, where we confuse around a little bit, but the actual meat of our shows, where we actually get into something interesting, could be a conference presentation. I mean, if you look at some of the subjects from last year and the year before that, what we do here on the Lone Gunman Podcast should be blowing everybody's socks off. And look, I love the youth of today, and I'm not knocking anybody, but seriously, there's some. Never mind. I'm not even going to get into it, because I'll just say this. When it comes to a conference presentation, okay, it should be about something that we don't already know. And the best example of this that I can tell you from most recent memory, the only person that I've seen do it, is John Newman, bringing out his Antonio Veciana things. Now, his process sucks. Okay. His skills, his presentation skills suck, but, and his people skills, he's a dick. But his work speaks for itself. You can't argue with the documents. That's something that I've always said here on the show. You cannot argue with the documents. And this year, the presence in Dallas has been reduced to one conference. I don't know what the hell Lancer is doing. I know there were some issues there last year And since then, and some things have happened, and it's unfortunate. But I don't know what the future of Lancer is at this point. And that's fine, because this whole thing needs to be reconfigured anyway. But this year, you have the presence of one conference in Dallas. And they can call it whatever they want. They can call it the JFK Historical Society or whatever they call it. I don't know what they call it. But it is and always will be JudyCon. Judith Very Baker. Yeah. Yeah. Despite putting a different dress on it and a little makeup, it's still very much the Cuckoo Conference. Yes. As long as you let that crazy bitch speak there, you will always be known as the Cuckoo Conference. And I believe JFK Conferences LLC is Judith Baker's copyright. And y'all can, like I said, y'all can put lipstick on a pig, but I'm going to call it for what it is. It is what it is. And for those of you out there who choose to speak at these conferences that are asked and choose to say yes, like why you would say yes, I don't know. By saying yes, you're actually discrediting yourself, because you are aligning yourself with frauds in the JFK community, at least to me. If you're on the same bill, okay, as people like Tosh Plumley and Judy Baker and James Files and whoever else they want to roll out in a wheelchair, you are doing yourself a disservice if you want to be taken seriously as a JFK assassination researcher. It doesn't matter if you have something great to present. I'm automatically disqualify you from hearing anything you have to say because of who you associate yourself with in this community. I'm sorry, but it is what it is. It is what it is. I don't know if it's an ego thing with some of these people. You know, anybody can write a book these days. Anybody can self-publish a book on Amazon these days. You're nobody special. Okay? Again, I orally write a book every week. 50 books a year. And I pack a lot more information in these oral books than is in a written book. You know, this is a fantastic medium because I can get on here and I can say whatever I want. I can show you documents. I can show you pictures. I can give you analysis. And you can consume it for free. You might have to watch a couple ads. Yes, I know. But even if this show wasn't monetized, YouTube would be putting ads in front of you, in front of everything anyway. And then they get the money. And they still get some of the money. Okay? They're just being very gracious to share with the content creators a certain percentage of said ad profits. Which is fine. It's fine. Again, people always say, well, we don't write JFK books to get rich. Yeah, no shit. Okay, well, I'm not doing this to get rich. Okay? I simply want to talk a little bit about legacy. You know, Keanu Reeves was once asked, what do you think happens after you die? And instead of getting into some kind of deep religious or political angle or esoteric angle, he said very simply, I think the people that love you will miss you a lot. And that's what it all boils down to, folks. How many times a day do you think about Mark Lane? How many times a day do you think about Harold Weisberg? How many times a day do you think about Marilyn Monroe, Joe DiMaggio? Muhammad Ali. How many times do you think about these great, important, some of the most well-known stars ever born? Musicians, the great musicians that have ever been, the greatest orators. How often do you think about these people every day? You don't. It's only when we get occasionally reminded of them that we pay them any mind at all. And that is why I'm going to keep talking about the JFK assassination, because the minute we stop talking about it and meeting behind closed doors in exclusive little clubs to talk amongst ourselves, that's the moment that everybody forgets all about it. Look no further. James Douglas came out with a book that was supposedly very good for the time. JFK and the Unspeakable. And he just came out with another book. And you know what? Nobody's talking about it. Nothing great in it. It's like, wow, you fell off that much. You fell off that much? Damn. That's crucial. But again, he got away from the horse that won him the race. And that's fine. I'm sure it did okay. Not great. Josiah Thompson, another early guy. 6 Seconds in Dallas. Fantastic. Early researcher. Fantastic book. Raised some very good questions. Very analytical. Released a book a couple years ago called Last Second in Dallas. Where's the fanfare? Where's the revelations? Other than the fact that you finally admitted that you got it wrong in 1966 and you were setting the record right now, which is what? I don't know. And I have his book. It is sitting over there on my bookshelf. Yeah. Mark Lane. Again, Rush to Judgment. Plausible Denial. Last Word. What was Mark Lane's last word, folks? You tell me what Mark Lane's last word was. Oh, fuck. I don't know. You think about folks that are around today that have made really great contributions to things. And I do know it's the secret boomer cabal that meets behind closed doors on private Zoom calls and private email chains to discuss among themselves things that would make you chuckle today. Things that would make you chuckle. Like, I can't believe that this guy would have done this great piece of research and then all of a sudden be worried about the placement of vehicles in the motorcade. Like, what? You're really going from that to that? And this is supposedly one of the greatest analytical minds of the case. When it comes to the CIA, the structure of the CIA, the flow of information in the government, legal matters, this, that. You go from two brilliant pieces, as a matter of fact, to I wonder why they moved the press car in this Dallas motorcade. Was it a conspiracy? Like, what are we doing here, folks? And I know everything old is new again. I get it. I see it all the time in Facebook groups. It makes me roll my eyes heavily into the back of my skull on a daily basis. But you're never going to be able to reach everybody. And everybody who thinks differently than you is not going to like you. And I get that. We all have our own various personal biases when it comes to this thing. We're all in different places in our research journeys. You know, and I've said on here before, I've been looking at this case for 35 years. Heavily conspiracy oriented, heavily a believer in the fact that Oswald was really a good guy, possibly a great American, possibly working for our government, undercover, doing things, being sheep dipped, pretending to be something he's not. When the whole time, well, maybe this dude is who he says he is. And then I think to myself, oh shit, man, am I becoming a fucking lone nutter? No, I'm not. But even if we can agree that based on the available documentation that's out there, and sure, you might run into some things where you might think, well, this is odd. Why does this guy say that he's doing that? And why does this guy say that he's doing this? And why is he doing this? And why is he doing that? And we may not have all the answers. I mean, this case has been so convoluted and scafoosified throughout the years that we'll probably never know the truth. And as much as people don't want to hear it, you have to understand we're 63 years on now. And we still don't have a consensus view of the assassination. Who did it, why they did it, other than the lone nutters. They have their answer. They know who did it. They think they know why he did it. Look no further. Nothing to see here, folks. End of discussion. But for me, that's not the end of the discussion. Even if Oswald was what he said he was and who he portrayed himself to be, it does not preclude a conspiracy to set him up to become the patsy. And as I'm ever inching my way towards being comfortable with an understanding of what I believe could have possibly taken place, then only will I rest on my laurels until I'm disproven off that theory. The one thing that you must be able to do in this community to have longevity, to be taken seriously, is to be able to understand when you got it wrong, to acknowledge the fact that maybe you got it wrong, and to be willing enough to look at new evidence that proves that you got it wrong. Or else you're going to be a sad, sorry sack, still holding on to a 30-year-old theory that's been debunked. And you can be the old man shouting at the sea and shaking your fist. And you look around and nobody is there to hear you but a billion grains of sand under your feet. And I don't do this because I want to be remembered. No, it's not it at all. I do this because I believe that we all deserve the truth of what happened that day. And I don't think we were told it. Okay? I don't think we were told it. And maybe they thought they had a good reason for not telling us at the time. That they being the government, they being government organizations, they have a lot of responsibility when it comes to governing millions and millions and millions of people and keeping us all in line and keeping us fat and happy and keeping us occupied with bread and circuses. When it comes to the actual truth about something and about what our government is doing, a lot of them think it better to just keep it hidden from us. You don't need to know that. You know, disclosing the fact that there's aliens among us and we've been visited by UFOs for the past 70 years. Oh my God, that would just throw everybody into an upheaval. You know, religion would fall apart. People would be panicking in the streets. Really? Really? But you can make billions and billions of dollars off of making movies and video games and writing books about aliens, right? The possibility that there's aliens, the possibility that there's Bigfoots out there, the possibility that there is magic in this world, things beyond our understanding, things the government would rather keep hidden because we as a people just wouldn't be able to handle it. We would just lose our minds. Well, would we? Most people are just worried about paying their rent, paying their mortgage, buying groceries this week, being able to put gas in their car to get to work, being able to keep a job, being able to have a job. That's what it all boils down to. You know, I am more than this. Although I was thinking earlier today that, you know, it's crazy. You know, when you think about just for shits and giggles, and I'm not comparing myself to this man, except maybe from the waist down, Elvis Presley, for example, right? Great American, served his country, groundbreaking musical artist, probably stole some of his shtick from the black people and rhythm and blues. But one of the most famous people ever in this world, the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, and his contribution to music, film, and just being a good-looking dude. I mean, but how many times do you think about Elvis Presley on a daily basis, unless you're a super fan? Like, I have a super fan aunt who there's literally shit in her living room like Elvis Presley lamps, clocks, dolls, whatever. Unless you're looking at something like that every day in your home, how often do you think about Elvis Presley? Hardly ever. Hardly ever. And when people are looking into this case 10, 20, 30 years from now, how often will they think about me? I've never written a book. They're probably not even going to know what a book is in 30 years, right? I'm guessing. It's going to be like the kids nowadays, collecting vinyl. Like, these are cool. It's retro, man. To actually have a physical book, like, what is this? What is this thing with paper and words on it? Like, who knows? By then, they could just, plug their USB finger into the computer and download, a PDF file of a book, and oh, okay, I got all of it. I'm not even joking. Who knows what's on the horizon for us? And God help our children and grandchildren. But I digress. Does it make me feel a little better that if, by some weird chance, my kids or grandkids would want to see what old Rob was like back in the day, they can always come on YouTube, as long as YouTube's around, and queue up some old Lone Gunman podcast episodes and see me for what I am, see my passions, hear me talking, hear me laugh, hear me make jokes, hear how serious I was about this subject and my passion for it. And maybe, just maybe, smile. Memento Mori, folks. Remember, we're all going to die. So, what are you going to do with your time? Just saying. Anyway, that's it for me. Thanks for hanging out for some random research ramblings with Rob. Until next time, folks, we'll see you. Peace. Random research rambling.